Oh.
All right, everybody, we're going to start up with our next panel, which is going to involve arguably some of the, if not the most important constituents in the industry. This is going to be a view from the leagues. And so I think we have everybody's bio up on the website, so I'm just going to jump right into questions. We'll leave a few questions for you in the audience. I'm Stephen Grambling. I'm from Morgan Stanley. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm just going to go down the line, and maybe if you can each talk to each of your respective roles and your organization's views on the broader sports betting industry. Maybe we'll start this side and go down that way, Eric.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. So Eric Rimsky, I work at the NBA. I've been at the league for nearly 10 years now. Our fantasy and betting group launched nearly 6 years ago, about a year before PASPA was repealed. I came up through the sponsorship side of the business, overseeing relationships with more traditional marketing sponsors like FanDuel and Anheuser-Busch and Gatorade, and eventually transitioned to this group full time. So obviously it's been an amazing ride for all of us who've been part of this for the last 5 or 6 years. And our group really saw what the NFL and Major League Baseball were doing around this space and felt like it was important for us to create a dedicated group in order to build the resources we need to tap into the engagement from fantasy and then eventually sports betting. So I started, my fandom as a child doing rotisserie baseball, and that was the way I got into it. And I keep up with my friends from college because I'm doing fantasy football. So we saw the engagement and the opportunities for a community that come from fantasy and betting, and we decided that a group made sense to tap into this further. So our league is very focused on the engagement elements of fantasy and betting generally. We have a number of sports betting partnerships, which I'm happy to speak about more, and just excited that the industry continues to grow.
Cool. Yeah, great to meet everybody. Thanks for having me. But so Brett Casey. I have 2 first names, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah. But no, I'm a SVP of Business Development and overseeing gaming and new business ventures, which is a vertical within our business development group, kind of focused on fantasy and sports betting. And very similar to Eric, I think my previous experience was really on the business development licensing side, our data licensing business. And that's what kind of queued us up in terms of being identified as the group that was really going to help spearhead a lot of the strategy and the commercial framework that we're going to adopt for sports betting, both pre-PASPA through to today. We have, similarly to what Eric was kind of mentioning, baseball has had a really storied history with fantasy baseball. The fact of rotisserie leagues being the first thing that kind of, created a new burgeoning industry across multiple sports was something that, being one of the first sports to do that led us to see the increased opportunities that sports betting had. I think we also are a sport that had a unique history related to sports betting, particularly with some problem areas that created some serious concerns for us. And so for us, I think it's been one of the really great things has been being a part of the integrity initiatives, being a part of really setting up a commercial framework to really protect the integrity of the game, but then also leave ourselves a lot of green space to grow fan engagement, grow the sport overall by leveraging sports betting as a fan engagement tool. So yeah, it's just been great being a part of it from day one. And I think for us, a lot of the focus is very much going from initial commercial frameworks to what's next? How can we improve products further? How can we improve the fan engagement customer experience further? So exciting times.
Great. Hi, I'm David Highhill. I'm with the NFL. I would say that in terms of our focus, I think it's largely the same as my 2 friends here. Our ball is pointier, but the things we care about is generally, I think, the same. We've been working on sports betting at the league office for a long time. I was in our corporate strategy group and doing a lot of sort of fan engagement work prior. And then within the last year or so, there was just so much activity that people were adding on related to sports betting in addition to their day jobs that weren't always sports betting related, that we organized in a way that there could be air traffic control to make sure that everyone's in the room at the same time as we work through all of our initiatives, just to make sure that we're focused long term and we don't have any unintended consequences. So I think broadly similar strategic alignments.
So I've heard each of you talk about fan engagement. Maybe before we jump into some specific questions, we can just lay the table. Who is each of your fans? What does the life cycle of a fan look like? And then how does that even tie into maybe who a sports betting fan is in terms of overlay? And maybe I'll start with you, David.
Sure. We've done a lot of fan work, and I think what's very interesting about the NFL is we spend a lot of time looking at size of fan base, demographic profiles, and it's effectively, for my survey research friends, our fan base is an omnibus panel of the U.S. Census. We have similar ethnicity splits and gender splits, and it's very large. So it means when we approach spaces like this, we have the benefit of being able to be targeted in how we approach fan engagement. And we know that everyone's version of sports betting ranges from having no interest at all to being highly engaged. So I think we approach fan engagement from the perspective of approaching fans where they are and delivering incremental experiences that sort of fit what people are looking for. And we use that through our ecosystem of partners, through the local teams that have their own relationships, and then through the league level where we have other assets like Red Zone or Fantasy and the like.
Maybe we'll go down the line here.
Yeah. So I think, there's the headlines for Major League Baseball over the past few years have been, like our fan base has gotten older, we've gotten less diverse, and I think it's actually spearheaded on a huge initiative around just fan data, better understanding the fan base, better understanding, gross segments of fans, no different than the NFL. So when sports betting came about, this actually was one of the key aspects of like, well, how could a betting audience be used to actually increase our fan base overall? And so, for us, the things that have like really stood out is bettors are younger, like compared to our average age group, they're much younger. They have a higher household income. We actually think that there are opportunities for actually improved diversity within sports betting segments overall. And they do, compared to the average, engage significantly higher than just the average typical fan. So for us, when we look at all the different types of fan growth, segments and differentiators. There's, the outdoor enthusiasts. There's the millennial families. Sports bettors is actually one of the top 3 sort of sub-segments that we've identified as kind of being critical to the growth of MLB. And we also think that there's, the other exciting thing is that there's a lot of overlap with other areas of what we call like skin in the game. So it could be the fact that somebody's playing fantasy. It could be the fact that they're going to play a so rare or like some type of like NFT collector's game. At the end of the day, it's speculation. It's having an opinion. It's wanting to kind of invest in the sport itself and create a game within a game. And so what we get excited about is sports betting obviously has such a great, traction within our fan base already, but we think that it could be a great layer onto more increased fan engagement through other areas of our business as fans just kind of this becomes a part of the natural evolution of fandom, that like people want to have their skin in the game. They want to have the game in the game as they're watching a live sport, and this is just a great launch pad to do all of that.
Echoing exactly what Casey said, I think we find the exact same thing about our fans: higher household income, more diverse, younger. As we think about our fan base, we sort of bifurcate that with respect to, we have our core fans and we have our casual fans. And we define core fans as those that engage with the league 3+ times per week. So that can mean attending a game, watching a game on television, engaging with our social media channels in some way. So when we think about sports betting and fantasy, we talk about that spectrum of bringing casual fans along to being a core fan and having more engaging touch points with the league. And we all know that there's a positive correlation between betting and fantasy and then, watching more games or following social channels more closely. So we think there's an opportunity to have fans follow not only their home team, but also tune into more games over the week. And so for us, betting is an engagement driver, but it's also a tremendous tune-in driver. We know that fans will have an increased interest in other games that are outside of maybe their home market, and that's going to have positive dividends across our entire business.
So I guess one follow-up on this is just how are you each measuring fan engagement? And then on top of that, what are there other opportunities to increase fan engagement as we think about whether it's sports betting or other opportunities that are tangential?
You start. That's your
very good
background.
I think in the way we approach sports betting, it's about serving fans for the sake of fandom first and not trying to just drive incremental wagering. That is not the goal. So when we look at what our KPIs are, it's generally the health of all of our business units. When you look at who bettors are predominantly, they tend to be big fans first. So for us, those KPIs remain in terms of things like tune-in and duration, and are they engaging in more content outside of live games, fantasy, all of it. So I think it's hard to say there's a specific betting KPI. It's much more about rising tide lifting all boats. I think the other thing that we get asked a lot about is, what is your view on how betting is impacting ratings? And I think that's a very hard question to answer. When you look at how fandom gets distributed versus state boundaries, that's not always a clean overlap, especially when you talk about, state by state, legal versus illegal. And we also know team performance drives ratings too. So it's going to take a lot of effort, I think, to tease out what is team fandom, what is betting, how are they driving each other. But I think intuitively we know that there's some stickiness to that, and it's helpful generally.
Yeah, echoing what David was talking about, I think we don't, it really depends on the initiative for what kind of a KPI we're going to attach to it. I'll give you a lot of what we've actually been doing to the point of like, Nielsen ratings, it's like there's a lot of noise that has existed, where it's COVID or team performance or anything. It's hard to tease out necessarily like the impact to media. What we have been doing is we've been identifying, we have our owned and operated digital platforms that touch a number of fans. We have identified self-identified bettors or people that we've run like a sports betting promotion for that resulted in a call to action that we've identified, listen, this person most likely is a bettor. And we've been comparing those people relative to, the general fan base. And so things like, for example, to David's point, we're really trying to just see whether or not sports betting is actually increasing engagement across every aspect of a touch point of one of our fans. So that means, like 40% more likely to stream games, better versus non-better. 36% more likely to attend games, better versus non-better. How like 30% in terms of how much digital readership, in terms of article views on a weekly basis. All those types of things are we're trying to tease out to better identify exactly what is the impact to actually creating kind of a sustainable, responsible form of gaming within our ecosystem. And the trends are all like very, very positive. It's always something, and again, that just is, it's inevitable. It's kind of one of these things that you place a wager on a sport. It's just gonna create an incentive for you to really tune in and get information, get some insights, and track the game as it goes along. So all the indicators for us are really positive. The other thing that, from a KPI perspective, that we want to drive handle. The other thing that we also want is to benefit, frankly, from like the benefits of cross-sport promotion within this, right? Like, at the end of the day, we see it as sports betting is, in and of itself, is an activity. You may be a baseball fan, you may be a football fan, but at the end of the day, if you're a bettor, you're going to bet on other sports. And there's a lot of, data that's really indicating that, without getting into the detail of like any one individual book, we've seen it where, books, while we may only take mid-teens in terms of overall percentage of handle within a sports book, 90+% of customers within any one individual sports book have placed at least one bet on baseball, which is great for us, right? Like, we want it to be something where the NFL is successful and the NBA is successful, and hopefully MLB will be successful from betting engagement as part of that, because I think as sports betting becomes a part of just general fandom, like, it is just going to create opportunities for us to, highlight an MLB market that's interesting, hopefully somebody wagers on it, and that'll cue in all those benefits from readership, viewership, ticket purchases thereafter.
We, everything that Casey and David said are true and also evident at the league. I would just focus on one particular execution that we had with FanDuel this year, which brings a lot of this to life. We look at the sports betting consumer as one that's going to over-index and all the things that they mentioned, but we put that to test by doing a League Pass couponing program with FanDuel this year, which is the first time we had executed something like that. So direct-to-consumer is, of course, a broadening and more important part of our business moving forward. So we worked with FanDuel to create a 3-month League Pass SKU where they could offer any new bettors or returning NBA customers the opportunity to get a free subscription to League Pass as part of their NBA activity. And we saw not only a tremendous amount of activity around that offer, but a number of people rolled to pay from there and then became NBA League Pass subscribers their own once the FanDuel offer expired. So all the things that David and Casey said are true, and we're seeing the evidence of that through those types of programs, that NBA bettors are over-indexing in viewership and therefore their fandom.
So a lot of what you've described is your roles as the leagues or the organizations. What falls on the teams versus your organizations as well? Because I can imagine that there could also be partnerships within the team. So where does that split kind of fall?
Sure, I could start. In our model, the way that our program or framework has worked is that operators become authorized by doing a deal with the league, and then they have the opportunity for other benefits, one of which includes to do team partnerships. And so the teams are running their own businesses. They're able to have their own partners as long as it's one that's been authorized by the league. I would say that the relationship we have with the teams, particularly in this area, is very much focused on collaboration. They lean on us for a lot of the learnings that we've done, not only around customer data, about relationships, which partners we think are going to be the ones that are most successful in a particular market, given the dynamics. And it's interesting, as you think about Ohio, which just came online, and Massachusetts is coming online this week, those teams have never lived or are just starting to live in markets where mobile sports betting is available. We have the benefit of experience of having relationships with the teams like in Philadelphia and Indiana and other places like that. We're sort of the more early adopters, that we have the learnings from those teams that we're able to impart on some of the other teams that are now coming online. So it's very much a give and take relationship. We learn from each other, but the teams have their own individual market deals.
Yeah, we have the same setup as the NBA with this kind of authorized gaming operator program and I think of the evolution of it has very much been similar in that I think in the early days it was very much education and frankly compliance, like setting rules and creating a little bit of we called it the crawl, walk, jog, run approach to sports betting rather than fully flipping on the switch and getting learnings as we go. Now it's becoming such that I think we really are frankly, somebody who is trying to innovate with our official partners. We have FanDuel and BetMGM as our two officials at the league level. We do a lot of experimentation, a lot of product development with those groups that then we share down with the clubs for them to go do with the Tigers and PointsBet on different types of initiatives, which is great for us. I think we're also starting to see a lot of not just like top-down innovation, but bottom-up, where clubs that have had really unique strategic relationships. The Nationals have had their on-site book with BetMGM for a couple of years now. They really have actually done and tested a bunch of initiatives with in-stadium experiences, in-stadium activations that have been really interesting. That then we've also adopted down to other clubs as more on-site premises sports books have started to grow. So it's been really mutually beneficial. And again, I think it's a real testament to this kind of evolution between getting initial commercial frameworks off the ground, setting up the right compliance, the right integrity, but now a lot of it really transitioning into how do we grow fan engagement from sports betting, how do we actually ensure that all boats rise with any new innovation that gets developed that can get passed down to the clubs, and that's what we've always tried to do.
Yeah, similar structure. Our clubs have relationships with local sponsors. We know that they're more, there's national brands and there's regional brands in some of these states. The one nuance I'd call out for us, the NFL league office holds all the media rights, so the live game rights. So we have sort of a value proposition to some of the operators when you talk about the scale of live game broadcast, because they're national and not regionalized. And then what's unique for our clubs is they obviously have incredibly vibrant game day experiences. And certainly for these operators, they're looking for unique experiential and hospitality and some of those types of assets, in addition to all the other great things that the team partnerships can offer. So I think there's a really good balance between sort of the national landscape of the live games and then the localized promotions and signups and experiential things that the teams can offer in their home states.
One of the places I imagine that you can be aligned with your team is also in legislation and trying to get, effectively more states over the line. Would love to hear each of your thoughts maybe on what the long-term path looks like for the industry. Are there any, markets that just probably aren't going to go? Do you think that there's any insight on, big states that you feel better about, and maybe what surprised you through that process?
I would say we work with our clubs really to make sure that we're aligned legislatively for structures that help channelize the illegal market to the legal market. We think that that's much better for transparency and integrity. We want to make sure that there's appropriate fan protections, responsible gambling initiatives as parts of what's happening. I would say that as it pertains to the state-by-state rollout, it feels a little bit like forecasting political elections, and you don't know until you know. So we try to stay close to the key stakeholders with the issues that are important to us. But ultimately, all politics are local.
Yeah, I think we have a dedicated kind of government affairs group at MLB that has been involved in a bunch of different legislative initiatives, especially early days. I think it now, similar to David's point, like has transitioned to where a lot of it's providing club support. It's really providing best practices, ensuring that legislative frameworks are looking out for the interests of the whole, not just the interests of any one individual club. And it's become a really good model too. A question of like, where things are going. Listen, Jeremy Kudon, I know, is speaking, and we work with ORC closely on a number of issues. Like the low-hanging fruit, as Jeremy likes to call it, is gone, right? It's like I think a lot of those quick mover states, have sort of dried up per se, and now the remaining states that are at least kind of considering it they're going to have different types of issues or different like friction towards a path towards legalization. It could be tribal sovereign issues. It could be different moral situations with different constituents in local communities, and all of that is going to have to get worked out. I think just generally speaking, we still, similar to what David was saying, we do believe that, a legalized industry is way safer than, an illegal industry or anything that's going to be existing in kind of an offshore market. We think that the benefits are real, and I think that there's a lot of just broad overall public sentiment to support legalization. But we want to do it in the right way. We want it to be respectful of each of the individual kind of stakeholders within each state. They're all unique, and they all need to be addressed in some effective way. The overall long-term trend is still towards legalization, and that's not just within the U.S. Obviously, it's issues abroad, and just like the broad path towards digital applications, digital adoption really helps spur a lot of appropriate protections. It's easy to kind of flip these industries on and create a new meaningful fan engagement opportunity, plus something that we think is really safe and effective, especially given the integrity initiatives that the leagues have put in place. So I think the broad overall trend, regardless of the fact that we may be hitting a path where the remaining states will have some hurdles to face, I think we still believe that there will be strong growth in future legalization and slow, steady but surely adoption with more and more states.
We were talking before the session, and David and I were talking about how we have a lot of similar partners and guests who had been at Super Bowl in Arizona, which was the first time a Super Bowl had been at a legalized sports betting state, and then a lot of guests traveled to Utah for the All-Star game, and there's a big divide, obviously, in those two states. So what's interesting to me is, as Casey was saying, that low-hanging fruit is gone, and it's impossible to predict what's next. I mean, what happened in Georgia this week, and, what happened in North Carolina or in Missouri last year, we're now at the point where a lot of the states that we expected to legalize more quickly are done, so the rate of change is slowing dramatically. And what's interesting to us, I think, is what happens to the operators now that the product roadmap is impacted in that way. We would talk to our partners about, okay, new features or things that you can involve or include in the product that would maybe create some more engagement around NBA betting. Those things fell down on the product roadmap behind launching in 10 to 12 states that were coming online each and every single year, which is certainly understandable. Now that rate of pace has changed, now that there's more of an increased emphasis on profitability, what does that mean for the product experience and our operators and how they're going to be able to invest in creating more engaging and interesting markets for fans? So, there's pros and cons, I guess, to the market continuing to evolve in that way.
So that's a good segue in terms of thinking about product evolution, and I think that technology has impacted how people view sports, how they engage with sports, bet on sports. As that all kind of comes together, what's the ideal experience as you think about your sport, your league, trying to tie in whether it's a mobile device, something on screen, or in person?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Listen, I think I don't have a perfect crystal ball in terms of what the perfect experience is. I think, generally speaking, I think we're making a big push, obviously, given the RSN situation, towards more OTT digital distribution of our games. I think that in and of itself is going to present a lot of opportunities just because of the fact that, OTT distribution provides a lot of opportunities for personalization. We have had our MLB.TV product for years, from the early 2000s that has been kind of a leading, OTT streaming platform from games. That's going to just get increased importance as, these rights situations get worked out at the local level. And so for us, we already have really interesting insights, stats, unique video player features that have gotten put in place and that give us great inventory for different types of sports betting activations. I sort of view it as, do I see a world where, FanDuel is distributing a large national package of rights? We're going to actually be streaming games within this upcoming season, which is going to be a great test for us and see how things kind of perform. They obviously have FanDuel TV now, which is a really interesting media outlet, and we'll see how that kind of performs. That remains to be seen if they're going to become a larger and larger media rights holder. I also think that, as we become much more focused on, a lot of MLB.TV distribution, whether it's MLB.TV or a partner like ours, like Peacock or YouTube or whoever, it's going to be something where we're going to be looking to integrate sports betting features within those applications. I could see it being something that it's living in both worlds in some capacity. I also think that there's a lot of product and innovations happening now that we've seen with the likes of the DraftKings and FanDuels and BetMGMs of the world, where the sports betting app itself is becoming a really, really interesting second screen experience for the main, picture on your big screen, and that is exciting to us, right? To be able to kind of create these more synchronized experiences where the Sportsbook app is really providing a lot of interesting data, contextual insights that don't flood the screen with a lot of numbers that might be in some fans' eyes a little overwhelming. Like, we think that could be an interesting complement in the route forward. So I don't know exactly what the gold standard product is going to look like. I don't even think anybody knows yet, but it gets back to what Eric was saying, is that what we're really excited about is, the previous state of the industry was very much focused on, I got to launch in the new state. I just got to get this app approved from a regulatory compliance perspective, and I got to get started, and I got to get initial customer acquisition. Now we're starting to get into a little day and age where I think a lot of the books are going to be focused on product, a lot of innovation. It'll give them more time to experiment. A lot of what's also exciting is a lot of books that are really investing in technology and engineering expertise, and I think it's just going to become such where a lot of experimentation is going to be done, and we'll identify what the future's end state is going to look like. And again, because of this broad transition into more digital distribution, I think the world's there's a lot of green space to find interesting, meaningful fan engagement opportunities.
I disagree with everything. I think the ultimate sort of thing to think about here is just optionality for fans. I think you could have two fans that on paper look very similar levels of avidity. They're both gambling the same amount. They both have similar jobs and similar settings. And one will watch only Red Zone and one will only watch one game at a time. And it's that degree of sort of customization that I think is ultimately where fans want to be. And it's our job to find the right products and partners to help serve them there. One thing I would sort of call out too is we've seen just an explosion in the same game parlays over the course of the last NFL season. And I think we need to think about products that both sort of look like a Bloomberg terminal for the people that are super interested in that, but also have much more casual appeal for fans that want to dabble and experiment and like their Super Bowl squares pools. And I think for us, it's about working with partners to help bring those experiences to life that serve everyone where they are on that continuum of sports betting.
That point on personalization is extremely important and relevant. And in our direct-to-consumer efforts, we're very much focused on meeting the fan where they are, exactly as David said. So up until now, we've been very focused on sort of the opt-in experience for sports betting around games. We have our NBA Bet, which is our content destination for all things gambling content that has a myriad of products that come off of that, whether it be a social handle or an NBA Bet stream, which DraftKings is presenting sponsor of. But that's our way of saying to fans, like, hey, if you're interested in betting content, this is where you find it, but not necessarily focus on pushing that content out to everybody. And so for us, as not only did the operators evolve, but also the landscape is evolving to more digital distribution versus linear distribution, we're starting to test new products based on what we're learning from our fans. Our NBA Bet stream is way up year over year in terms of engagement, in terms of viewership. And so we're launching a new product very shortly where there's actually going to be a League Pass overlay option within all of our digital products that DraftKings is also going to sponsor. And that just gives another opportunity for fans to choose what it is that they're interested in partaking in while they're watching a game and have that continue to be an opt-in experience, but move along the spectrum in terms of what we're able to surface to fans in a personalized way.
So, David, you mentioned in-game parlays is one big surprise, it sounds like, from this season. Every season, I imagine, is a little bit different. You've wrapped up your season. Everybody else is kind of either in the middle of the season, just about to start. So what are some of the other learnings from the season that you would impart to them as they think about ways to maximize the opportunity in front of them or in the middle?
It's a great question. I think continuing to focus on experiences that are casual and that give people a way in the door. I think for folks that are looking at odds for the first time, it can be really intimidating, and finding ways to explain for people that are interested is really important. And I think, we think about what's going to drive people to engage and what's going to drive them to stick around. There's sort of two things that are very important. Tune-in matters a lot, and then duration of viewing matters a lot. That's how ratings get constructed. So finding more ways to keep people engaged for games that may not be your preferred home team or games that may not be so competitive by the end, I think is always helpful.
Yeah, we're just starting out. But if you want to add on to but we're adding on to I've been monitoring like what the NFL's been doing, because a lot of what has been exciting to us has been this idea of like, I think the NFL with the same game parlay has actually really started to tap into that casual, more broader fan base that, to us, I'm not a crazy, I have 2 kids now. I can't follow the NFL storylines as much as I used to. And so having a same game parlay that kind of hits on all the headlines of the stories across like a feature NFL game that's really exciting, it's really come to me as being the thing that I love to wager on, because of the fact that, like, listen, I can have a little bit of a feel for an angle with some minimal insight or minimal kind of gut feel instinct that leads me to actually make my first wager. I think for us, like, that's something a lot of our initiatives have been focused on, more in-game activations, in-game wagering. I think what that is still something that's absolutely exciting for us. I think dumbing it down even further, going back to like a same game parlay, finding an interesting headline for an MLB game that can be complemented with the right market, that can be pushed through to fans, both in terms of pre-game editorial coverage, pre-game shows, into the game itself. I think the NFL has done an incredible job of that. And I think a lot of the NFL sportsbooks, or the sportsbooks that are really leaning into it, have done an incredible job with innovating in that space. And so for us, I think that's where we're trying to benefit from those best practices and really think about how we're going to adopt it for this season.
I would just, on top of those things, I think the NFL has done a great job of creating more casual props, like first touchdown score and things like that I know are extremely popular. I know Travis Kelce during the Super Bowl may have won people or lost people a lot of money. But Major League Baseball also with no run first inning. So we've seen a lot of what the other leagues are doing and tried to mirror that. And we're doing a first to 15 market now with a lot of our operators, and it's created that more casual opportunity. And it's about storytelling, not just from a betting market perspective, but it also talks about like the tenets of the game themselves. And I think very similar to the way the other leagues approach it. When you think about first to 15, it's like who gets off to the fast start. And now that's a betting market, but that's also a storytelling mechanism that our broadcasters can use during the game, or something we can talk about in programming leading up to it. And then there's the statistics that come from there. What does that mean to get off to a fast start? How likely is the team to win? And then you can continue building on it. So I think all these more casual gaming markets that are focused on micro betting moments during the game can lead to enhanced storytelling. And I think that's something we've seen from the other leagues that we're continuing to focus on ourselves.
So on that, effectively enhanced storytelling and micro betting, there's a component of it which requires data. Some states require official data, others do not. I imagine you all have a specific bias towards official data, but what's the pushback that you typically hear? What's the pitch for having official data be part of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, what we found is that almost 100% of the U.S. market is using our official data. It is vital as the source of record, I think, as a fan protection element. We don't get a lot of pushback. I think it's unique for us that we can incorporate not only our down and distance as quickly and as accurately as we can, which is faster and better than anyone, but also that we can layer on our next-gen statistics. So for those that aren't as familiar with that, every player on the field has chips in their shoulder pads, as well as within the ball. And what that allows for is a lot of incremental measurement and statistics around things like speed and separation and a variety of other metrics. So a combination of our official traditional down and distance feed, as well as these next-gen stats, I think really helps supercharge what happens next in the market and how we can start creating those incremental experiences.
And is that all done in-house, or do you have partners who typically help you with that technology implementation, but then there's also the analytics that go along with it?
That's right. We have been working on our next-gen stats product for years outside of a betting context. Clearly, it has applications, and I think there's a lot of excitement there. Yeah. Genius Sports is the official distributor of our data and then live game video, and we rely on them as our partner to set up the relationships with all of the sports books.
Yeah, we have a similar situation. Sportradar is our official data partner, but we also have authorized data distributor deals with likes of Genius and Swish Analytics. So we have a couple people in the space who are all licensing to books. So our value proposition of official league data is always about speed, accuracy, and data fidelity richness, right? Like, and I don't think similarly, I can't name a sports book that isn't using official league data right now. Like, and it's been really successful in terms of helping to drive a lot of product innovation, which is again what the whole purpose for us, like really investing in our data infrastructure, was very much to lead to this day where it actually could help drive a number of great sports betting products, but not just sports betting products, media products alike. Our sport has had that history of the Moneyball sport where just data and analytics of baseball are kind of synonymous with being a baseball fan in general. And so luckily, because of those investments, it set ourselves up for a lot of success. I think nobody's denying the speed component relative to an unofficial data source. I think we are 500 milliseconds worth of latency coming in is something that right now just isn't being beat in the market. There is that level, like people see the level of accuracy, like the fact that this is coming straight from the official scorer's mouth is something that, again, no other entity can really reproduce. But I think where we're really starting to see a lot of traction and really more adoption of really just use cases and product development opportunities is really from all of that richness of the data sets. Like for us, we are now just starting to see markets tied to pitch speed and markets tied to home run distance, and our Hawkeye systems are the things that actually make that available with very, very, very high levels of accuracy. And so I think not just that, but also just the derivative products that are being built off of those really advanced systems. We see game day trackers, being provided in real rich states with, low levels of latency. We're starting to see different types of real-time natural language insight tools being utilized by books. Like all these things are just at the end of the day, being built off of the data that we have in our parks and the infrastructure that we've built. So I still think that, will there always be an unofficial data stream? Yes, I think that is something at the end of the day, like there's somebody who can, sit in front of a TV screen and log a game. Will it ever be able to beat the official? No, and I think the gap is actually going to widen because of the fact that we continue to invest in it. A lot of product development, opportunities are still, just being explored. And for us, I think we've seen a lot of traction with the books, and again, we want to lean in. We want this is a critical piece of value that we can bring to the industry. And why we're going to continue to invest in it further.
And I think official league data takes on utmost importance as the pace continues to expand towards in-game betting. I think now we're seeing greater than 40%, but we expect closer to 70%, which is what we're seeing internationally for in-game betting. So official league data becomes even more important as we move along that spectrum. So I think there's just continuing to see more benefits moving forward, and that official league data will become even more important than it is today.
So maybe putting on an investor hat, that's one of the things that we hear from institutional investors is concerns that in this industry, the sports betting industry in particular, that most of the economics are going to go to effectively the folks on stage here. Maybe you can talk to how you think about aligning yourselves with the various partners throughout the space, whether it's operators, you talked about this a little bit, but even from an economic standpoint, aligning yourself with sports betting, the sports books, effectively the operators, as well as official rights, data analytics companies.
I can start, and I'm talking from the sports book side of things. We design our partnerships such that they're mutually beneficial and that there's incentive to both us and the operators to continue to grow the business of betting on basketball. And so I would say, in doing so, one of the things we're working with them in collaboration is continuing to think of new product development, new opportunities to engage the bettor in different ways. What's also important, I think, to mention as part of this is finding the right balance between pushing betting on the NBA, but also doing that in a responsible way. And I think that's one of the things that we talk a lot about at the league, particularly over the last year, has become even more of utmost importance. We launched a partnership with the AGA last month, and thinking about what's the right way to push sports betting to our fans, but doing it in a way that's responsibly and having those responsible betting messages as part of it. So I think one of the biggest nuances I find in my role on a day-to-day basis is just finding that right balance of growing the industry, growing the pie for everybody, but doing it in a way so that we are avoiding any kind of overcorrection, which we've seen, in some other international markets.
Yeah, and we structure our deals similarly in that our whole goal is for both parties to benefit as the industry grows. I think the only thing to add to what Eric said is I think it's going to become even more relevant for us as leagues really start tapping into the audiences and engagement within the apps and of the sportsbooks themselves to benefit other sides of the business. Like Eric mentioned the NBA League Pass, we did something similar with MLB.TV and BetMGM, and it was from a return on investment perspective, really, really positive. A number of people that took a free trial with MLB.TV ended up signing up for a paid subscription the following year. Like, we're going to test that out with tickets. We're going to test that out with merch. Like, for us, I think, I keep on kind of like dumbing down, simplifying, in that like the bet slip itself is one of the most valuable pieces of information from a league perspective. Like the fact that you can tell somebody that their eyeballs are going to be on the screen. I know which state they're in. I have so much information that I can benefit from to drive other primary aspects of my business, that I don't think this is ever going to be a situation that is just going to be a rights fee situation. Of course, like our job as a league is always going to try to be maximize as much value from a rights fee perspective as possible. But at the same time, this is an industry that has so many additional benefits as part of our fan ecosystem, that establishing those mutually beneficial kind of paths towards growing the business is going to be something important for us. And again, like something that we always have tried to structure our deals, not just with operators, but also with the sport radars of the world and all the groups within the the value chain of sports betting. We're going to try to have it be something where everyone sees plenty of profits, plenty of revenue opportunities within baseball betting, and something that hopefully those groups continue to invest in the future.
Yep. There's no question that there's Wall Street pressure on these operators. I think you see a lot of that in public comments that are being made around marketing spend and just sort of managing that. It's very clear, I think, from what you've seen in historical state launches as well, that operators have started showing up even bigger in year one than they had previously. And the way that they front-loaded some of their promotional spending, they're doing more of that. It's our job to help explain, I think, our unique position in the ecosystem. There's some data from Canby a few years ago that something like, out of all first-time bets ever made in sports betting, 41% of those are on an NFL game. And that's greater than our share of handle, but we provide unique value to the operators. And it's our job, just like all the other leagues, that we are a very unique part of the ecosystem because we are the league and the sport that sort of drives their products as well. So it's our job to approach it as a partnership and align incentives so that they get fair value, because it's not good for anyone if it's really lopsided in terms of where the value is coming from. It's our job to find that middle ground, and that's what we're trying to do.
So one of your other partners on the media side was also a partner with some of the operators, whether it was NBC with PointsBet, you had Fox Bet, and they seem like they've fizzled a little bit. I guess, what do you think comes next from the relationships between media and operators, and how does that potentially impact the leagues?
Yeah, from us, just with national broadcast partners, it's different than some of the more regionalized dynamics, but all of our major media partners, for the most part, had also partnered with the sportsbook. A lot of them were embedded across the entire network's ecosystem because they don't carry only NFL games, they carry lots of other sports, and they have broad sports fandoms. I think you've seen that there's consolidation among sort of the top 7 or so operators, now make up probably north of 95% of all U.S. market share. So that dynamic is going to continue, I think, to happen. But it's going to be our job to work with them to make sure that we can find the right ways to integrate the betting partners both within the media ecosystem and also from the league in ways that drives, I think, all three of our outcomes successfully.
Yeah, I think it may have fizzled per se, but I think like the importance of those deals are just going to continue to grow in the future. I get back to like the transition from linear to streaming, the unit economics for streaming or something. You need to find other ways to kind of make money off of these users, right? And so like sports betting is going to play a critical component of that. I think a lot, and again, Eric was speaking about this previously about like personalization, right? Like having the ability to kind of create a personalized experience for a fan as they're watching. And I think like, listen, eventually there's going to be something where 10% of our fan base is betting to 15% to potentially 20% of our fan base is betting. So from a media perspective, having those NBC PointsBet kind of relationships will increasingly be important. It's a great sponsorship asset. There's unit economics to be gleaned from that from a media rights perspective. I think there's also just serving fans appropriately and actually creating really great personalized experiences in these in an OTT world is something that I think a lot of our media partners are going to be looking to do. So I sort of view it as similarly that like it may have like sort of waned a little bit, but I think it's just going to grow, especially as more consolidation happens, more product development happens. I think you're just going to see more and more of those partnerships and really actually become something where it's like as part of the fan experience. There's a PointsBet sort of wallet in whatever NBC Peacock thing exists. Like I think those kind of examples are going to pop up more and more in the future.
And for us, I agree, of course, but what's interesting to me is as operators' perspectives has changed, as David was saying, about focusing more on acquisition, potentially more than awareness, how they're utilizing those partnerships to drive more acquisition. I think a lot about our partners at Warner Media Discovery and FanDuel and how they've really how they've integrated their FanDuel's brand into the overall ecosystem of NBA on TNT. You see not only some integrations during the game itself, you have the betting integrations during the pregame, but they have the relationship with Charles Barkley as an ambassador. So FanDuel is integrated in the game in so many different ways, and that's just a continued evolution of how I think brands are thinking about those partnerships as less of a naming opportunity and more of an opportunity to have integrations.
So we're coming up to the end here. Next up, we're going to have responsible regulation. So maybe before we depart, we'd love to just hear from you all, since we're going to segue into responsible gaming. What are some of the biggest partnerships and opportunities that you're pursuing in responsible gaming regulation?
So I mentioned earlier that we just started our relationship with the AGA around their Have a Game Plan initiative. March is Problem Gaming Awareness Month. So this is just a critical focus for us as we think about the way that we should participate in the ecosystem moving forward. Not only do we have those partnerships, we also look very carefully at our guidelines and our rules around the amount of integrations that are happening in the game. So this is just, I think, a continued focus for us moving forward as we think about the ecosystem at large.
Yeah, we've been partners with the AG. We announced this past fall, and for us, like we're working with Kate and Casey on a bunch of different educational campaign initiatives. We have an opportunity to actually have our clubs opt in as part of this program. We're working on getting more of our clubs kind of signed up as part of this. So I think again, it's just a critical aspect to us that we want to create a healthy ecosystem for fans. We don't ever want this to be something that's going to become a vice. And I think it's also, first of all, it's great for the operators in that they have a healthy audience base, but also great for our fans. We don't ever want it to be something where people view sports betting as a negative relative to the fan engagement. We call it an over-gamification of the sports betting ecosystem for us. Like we want to be Disney this thing. We want to be a family-friendly sport first and foremost, which is why personalization and giving sports betting to fans who want it, but fans who don't, that's always going to be critical for us. So, the AGA has been a great partner. We're going to expand our efforts with them constantly, and I think we're excited to just be a great educator as part of this and just roll out more initiatives in the future.
Yeah, we've been partnered with the National Council on Problem Gambling for the last 2 seasons. So with that, we give them a large grant. We've been working with them on national campaigns, so that's integrated into our games, all of our shoulder programming and media. We also created club toolkits that we distributed to all the teams. Every team that had any sort of sports betting sponsorship was also activating against this platform and driving awareness and access to resources through both their local media placements as well as what they were doing in-game as well. So that's been core to what we've been doing here, and as long as we're in this space, we are also in the responsible betting business as well.
Awesome. With that, thank you, Eric, Casey, David. Appreciate all the time.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.